Hello, and welcome to my stream. My name is Dr. Heatsink, and I'm just streaming the art project that I've got. Now, what we're going to do today is that we're going to review some of the textures that we've made, what the project looks like at the moment, and have a go maybe at trying to fix some issues that I think we've come across and make a start on rigging. Before that, just give me 1 second. Alright, so there's a couple of things then. So this is the first time I'm using some royalty-free music. The link to the source, or at least where the website where I've got it from, is in the description. So if you ever if you felt like it was, you know, interesting, you can go there for it. Okay. Second thing then, I'm using a slightly different keyboard today. In a really stupid move, I've managed to spill cola all over the keyboard I usually use. How unfortunate. Yeah, so I'm currently using a really bad temporary keyboard. I've got another one coming in tomorrow. It's all in good fun. Well. Anyway, so gonna look at the model we've got. So this is Sakia from Toho Project, and she is sitting around 100,000 triangles right now. But we've just finished the texturing process last night. We almost finished it in the last session, and then I finished it off in the evening. So this is what it looks like now in Marmoset. We've applied subsurface scattering to all of it. So every element except the eyes and like the eye shield has an element of subsurface scattering added on. So where there's potential for maybe some light bleed, and there's a very subtle hint of it in here. There's subtle hints of it in the hair as well, but you won't really see that. But obviously the place where you would expect it to be definitely active, the skin. Okay. Made some changes as well just to this sort of area. It's not that you would have been able to see, but if you were to zoom in really closely to this sort of area, you would see artifacting, because the color mask would not necessarily overlap fully. So what you got was a gap between the shirt and the blue clothing, and so that resulted in a bit of a a bit of a like where the masks don't overlap, you get this sort of just plain white color. So I had to go in and run that through with a just a brush, just to make sure that at least one of the masks covered both of those. I also made it a little darker over there just to make it very clear that these two were different. There's a little bit of AO painted over there across the whole of this sort of line. Okay. We do still have the error over here, but it's not been noticed by the people who have been giving me feedback. Instead, there wasn't that much feedback. The only point of real contention that some members had was that perhaps the hair was too big. We'll have to compare to concept to really verify that, but perhaps most valid. Oops. If we go on to back, so around here was a little bit of there's just something that someone thought might have been a bit problematic, particularly the way that it sort of cuts in. I think I can agree with. This area may have some issue, sort of like that. So we may need to do some manipulation just to get it to overlap in a more pleasing way. And we can do that in Maya, which I think will work. But in order to be able to do that in Maya, we're going to need to load in the textures onto the model. It's not exactly difficult or anything, but it gives us a better guide than if we were just doing it with no textures on. We'll get there. I've added subsurface scattering to the arms and I've painted them a bit more as well. So yeah, there's a little bit of SSS going on in the arms and a little bit of painting just to give it more form as well. Alright, there was a lot of adjusting in terms of the SSS amounts that would be going in on the face. Well, okay, so the other thing as well, sorry. So over on the eyes here, you'll see this layer that has a divid opacity map on it. There's also a little bit of clipping over here. We can fix that pretty quickly though. That's no issue. But this eye shield has a little bit of a opacity mask on to simulate, harsher shadows on that. And then when we look at an actual render in Marmoset, so when we look at the actual render, we can see that the divid opacity map has been rendered, so you get the actual shading on it. So that can be interesting. I think that it's worth doing on a character like this, so that when the eyes move, the shadow doesn't move weirdly. Okay, so with that then, are there any areas that we could look into to try and make better before we begin any rigging, or note them so that we can improve them whilst the rigging process is going on? Because I don't think we need to demonstrate any more texture painting techniques at this point. There is a issue here that we can fix with just moving the vertices around, perhaps, in Maya, and if it gets really, really bad, we can, load it again in Substance with the updated mesh placement and rerun that. There's also an issue over here, I think, where it's not quite been handled correctly. So there's bits of the height map that are not reaching a certain threshold. So if they're not a certain value, they won't raise up properly. It won't affect the normal map properly. So what you get is like this half measure here. So this is going to need to be fixed as well. But that's something I think that I can do in my own time. I don't think it quite needs to be demonstrated. Okay, what else? I think in terms of the immediately obvious things, those are okay. I think the arms could look at having a little bit more sort of checks in terms of what the inner elbow should look like. For now, we'll keep it, but it may be the case where it needs to be reworked in substance or something like that. But I think that as a whole, the model is in a state where it is good enough to consider moving into the next stages, and any changes that can be made in Substance Painter will apply on a texture level, right? And hopefully won't need to reproject from. The only thing that would need any kind of UVing or reprojection is this aspect here. Unfortunate, but at the same time it's also on a very hard to see spot realistically, right? So if you were looking at it from here, for instance, you can barely tell that that's an issue. If you do like a super close zoom up here, yeah, of course you're gonna run into problems, but that's not, I think, what people want to, you know, see or focus on. Okay. Last sort of thing I guess I can talk about with this is just the way that scatter maps and translucency work. So I think I have a much greater understanding of it now. So, from what I understand, if you are using Marmoset with scatter maps and translucency maps, or you know, for subsurface scattering, if your scatter map is colored, you can just apply a white color over on the right here so that you don't further manipulate the result that you're after. This then is the scatter map is the color that you intend to render. The scatter depth will be how much of this model is affected by subsurface scattering, and like it determines this with I presume some crazy maths that I don't pretend to understand necessarily. It is not something that you want to raise too high though. So if you raise this too high, it becomes a little bit too weird and becomes very waxy. So unless that is the actual material that you're meant to be making it from, you wouldn't go that high. Thankfully I've got undo to get it back to the value that I had picked. Right, so then the translucency map is how much transparency and how much scatter is applied on a sort of percentage level, where white would be 100% and black would be basically nothing. So, and the easiest way I think to demonstrate this, just to remove the hair for a second. Hopefully I can get rid of the rolls at the top as well. Can't quite see it though. Ah, it's over here. Oops. No, it's not. Oh yes, of course. There you go. Makes sense. So anyways, the easiest way to demonstrate this, I make sure that one of the ears is actually, you know, being hit by this light, and increasing the transparency should cause light to go through this ear. I don't know. Maybe that the value is a little bit too low here, and that this value is not high enough. Yeah, so there we are. It was just that the light itself wasn't that bright, but as you decrease or increase transparency, it shows up. And then the depth suggests how much this light shows up through it. Again, I'm not going to explain exactly the way, but I think you just end up playing a lot with the sliders for something that makes sense. So a translucency depth where this light is hitting this surface, you wouldn't necessarily want this area to be showing up through it, right? Not like that. So, because it's just too thick. So, if we just go back to where it came from, hopefully we haven't hit our complete undo history. Probably have now. Alright, back on with the headband, back on with the hair. And I guess the final thing to talk about with this is the whole fuzz aspect. Fuzz really, all that is just Fresnel. In the simplest way possible, it's just a rim light that is applied. So when you have really high fuzz, so to speak, as you see, it just sort of indiscriminately gives you an edge light. So now you can use a so-called fuzz map and of course mask it by the glossiness or roughness of the material, and that will give you a pretty decent effect. We don't need any fuzz maps here, as far as I can judge anyway. We don't have like that level of material fidelity where we need to account for individual hairs or something, so that's not appropriate for this project. But if we add a little bit of fuzz, we do get a small amount of edge lighting, which I think can help quite a bit, just to sort of show the form of the object. Okay. So, to clarify, this bit needs fixing. This bit we can try and fix today on this stream. Well, a little bit. We won't go too far, because I think that one of the things that we want to try and get on with is starting this skeleton so that we can start posing the character. And character posing is really important for a project, because without it, it's very lifeless. And when you run out of time to pose a character for a particular submission, like say for a competition or work or something, it really hurts the project. So we really want to be able to hit that. Plus, you can do all sorts of material changes and stuff while that's going on. Some people pose their characters like out of ZBrush and perhaps attempt to like work on it through that. I think that's a little bit strange. I've never really done it. I've always made the model first and then posed it. So it may be just that the ZBrush pose it after all of the unwrapping and stuff. Maybe that's it. But anyway, so I'm gonna move over to Maya now. I'm gonna check that I'm on the correct view. Yep. We've got the character here. It's just a low poly model. It should all be attached together with no weird holes or anything. I would hope. And hopefully not much clipping either. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is just start applying all of our textures on. I'm just going to navigate to the folder that has all of the character textures in. So I can just sort of drag them on. And I don't need every single one, I just need enough to be able to define the meshes so that I can actually see what's going on. Funnily enough, if you've got a checker map or something and you're doing unwrapping, if you run it through a blend and then basically blend it with other colors, so in this case pink, yellow, blue, you can then get a sort of like a way of being able to determine which areas belong to which material. So you see that this is, you know, this material is different to this material, which is different to this material, this material, this material, etc. Right? So also gonna just delete some of these like old materials as well, because they're no longer necessary. Right. This one quite clearly is the hair, it's labeled that way, which definitely helps. And we don't need this aspect anymore. Alright. I think I can just drag it on. I can't remember. Normally I just navigate to the actual item, but I figure I want to try like just dragging on the image. And so it does work. So if you get your image and you drag it on, it will work. It will just automatically import the file in, which is great. Right. Oops. It would help if I was putting it in the right place. Probably just look to moving that as well. I just click on it and move it, and it will disconnect. There you go. Alright, connect the color back up. And if I look at it, there we are. There's our texture. Right. Next one, M5 skin. I've also got a yes, sorry. This don't like ignore this bit. Use the name for the actual, like when you gave the material the name, it's here and it reflects onto this node, not this one. Right. Anyways, the skin base color. You could also since these are from Substance Painter, you could input these into, say, an Arnold material, and they should still work. I mean, you may have to tweak them a bit, but they would, I think, still work to some degree. You might need to tweak a lot of it, actually. Still. I suppose it's worth trying. Well, frills here. The eye shields need transparency texture in order to work properly. I think it'll be translucence. It may not necessarily render though in the actual window. Probably not, but that's not important anyway. And there should be another the skirts material as well. So goes. Right. Hide these like the shield. We can see there's the eyes there as well. Close that now. And that kind of gives us a better estimation for when we're manipulating this material. Sorry, this mesh even. So because we can see that it's quite a harsh change, quickly jump to Maya again for a second. Up. And it does sort of feel like it's like this bit should be moved over a bit, perhaps. There's also an overlap over here where a like a normal change is going. I mean, look at it. This is being covered then by this bit, but it causes a massive plane change, so it results in this lighting here. Okay, so I'm going to move this down to the Wacom screen so that I've got that as reference. Just going to move some of this around. The way that I think might be effective to do this is soft selection. So if you hold B, you can change the soft selection. And I mean, soft selection isn't always the way of going about it, but it tends to be the quickest way to resolve things like this, at least in my experience. Now, unfortunately, when we do load all of this back into Marmoset, all of the folders that I had set up are going to be basically destroyed. So we won't be able to get too comfortable with the idea of like folders within the mesh, but that's okay because it's all gonna be re-rigged anyway. So it's not that much of a problem. We're reaching the sort of final stages, I guess, of the project, so we don't really need to consider too much like the current status of this test mesh. You can also try importing into Unreal Engine 4, see if the same materials are going to render, you know, reasonably similarly. I'm going to mess with the soft selection until I get the kind of thing that I want out of it. Trying to align these lines up with that sort of inset on the other mesh that it's intersecting with. Not too fussed about it being perfect or anything, because it's not. I'm more just interested in making the error go away, really. And I'm also thinking that tomorrow there may not be a live stream because instead I have a deadline for a project breakdown, 2 of them actually. So what might happen instead is that those will be shared via Twitter and maybe a short like video. Probably not though, I make no promises with that, but I've got a deadline for 2 breakdowns. So one of them is going to be a shader I've made in Unreal, and then I think the other one's going to be how I approach creating character faces for that particular shader, possibly. But one of them is definitely going to be the shader breakdown. Hope not to make it too boring, but there's a fair amount of code in there which is applied via the UE4 material editor, but it's a very complicated shader, so it tries to emulate a lot of PBR sort of workflows while still being for stylized stuff, like controlling things like how much shadow does something get, how much how big is the specular, things like that. I'm hoping it will be interesting anyway. Hopefully. Oh, I've got symmetry on, didn't need that on. Hopefully be a bit better that side, but we won't really know until we see the normal map. Same thing over here as well, I'm just trying to line up. Out these edges with these lines on the other meshes underneath. So this bit might even be, you might even be able to just hide it by throwing it down. Not that that's something you should aim to do. But I do wonder how much video game art is resolved by just, you know, hiding the problematic parts away. It wouldn't be too surprising if it was quite high. A slightly like drifty soundtrack. Not that that's a bad thing, it's just kind of I'm starting to get a little like drowsy myself. But I do work long hours, so I guess that's only natural. Definitely set, like once this the breakdowns I'm doing are finished, definitely want to set some time aside to, you know, be able to go to sleep properly. I think definitely want to do that. I want to get at some of the stuff that's hidden in here. Sorry for the scary image. A booger. Ah. Other aspect here where this line probably should be coming in. Be careful not to accidentally like overstretch this. bigger and throw it a bit more in. Slightly depressing is that after having spilled Coke on my keyboard, obviously half the Coke on is just gone. Gotta use the caffeine. Unfortunate luck. Definitely could be using that. Okay. That now. I mean, it could always be that it still has issues, but we won't know until an actual Disney. How we won't actually know until we run it back into Marmoset, whether or not it's truly set up right. Really did not. I really did lose my train of thought there. I really need sleep. Oh dear. Alright then. I'm gonna select more music for next time. Hopefully longer pieces as well. I'm hoping it's having a positive effect and it makes this moments of silence a little less jarring and empty. Hope. Okay, this. I think that could go in there a little further. Also hoping that you don't hear the clicks as much. I believe the keyboard I'll have coming in isn't mechanical, so like as much as I'll miss the fun aspect of that. It would be nice to have less clicking going on during the streams. That way, hopefully, it'll be a little less jarring and mental. Slipped. There are also some opportunities to make this mesh more asymmetrical as well. I think I'd be kind of careful about that though, because obviously one of the benefits of being asymmetrical is easier rigging, funnily enough. So the more asymmetrical things you've got, the more potential problems you might run into if you are rigging. I don't want to spend too long on this part though. We'll probably finish up in about 10 minutes here, give it a check, and move on to like making the skeleton. Now, that being said, when making the skeleton, you don't want to like finish, like that is to say, think of the rest of the mesh as finished. Like if they are unfinished and you're actually binding the skeleton to the mesh, then you're going to find it's really annoying to unpair and then repair the mesh back, particularly if the bind history is the the actual like bind values are lost. You know, say like you had this hair, right, and you bound it to some hair bones, and then you removed them and then tried to bind it again. You know, there is the chance that it will remember, and you know all of your previous like bind painting is okay, but as soon as you start like deleting vertices and adding new ones and reordering things around, it changes the vertex order, and that tends to be the way that bind history is saved. So you can really run into problems when trying to bind something back to a set of bones if it's already been bound. find yourself repeating work again and again, and of course, as you probably have worked out, not what you want to be doing. So don't do that. Probably not. Maybe that I need to like get some kind of cola or something. Just a small drink. And place it far away from the keyboard. Right. I really did not need that to happen. It was extremely unfortunate. The keyboard I had was a really good one as well. It was the Corsair K70 RGB. Now I don't care that much for RGB, but I did really like the Cherry MX Blue switches it had. I'm gonna miss that quite a bit. I do like the clicky aspect of it, but perhaps it's time to give it up a little. I think the keyboard itself was running into some problems anyway, but still really regret that. Alright then, so it might be a case where some of these still need like to be smoothed a little, just a bit. I always have this habit of like selecting something again. I don't know why. Even though I've already selected it or I'm currently manipulating it and I just forget that I am. I think you can tell my movements get slightly weird when I'm nodding off. Can't hide it anymore, I am very tired. Yeah, hopefully when I finish the breakdowns it'll all return a little bit more normal. Alright, let's just see how that goes. Could be okay, could be worse. Who knows yet? Alright. I think that's as good enough for now. If we need to further smooth it, we can like run it through ZBrush or something. But for now, let's just give it a go. Now, I don't necessarily want to ruin the whole setup that I've got in Marmoset at the moment, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to save it first. That bit's saved. And now I'm gonna take all of this. Yep. We shouldn't have that there. I save it over somewhere instead. Save that there first, and export. Oh, yes, here. Oh, yeah, I'm just. And we're just going to click over here. Oh, maybe I didn't export it in the right directory. Clicking. Oh, it's in. Ah, right, I see where I've gone wrong. Yes. Wrong folder. That's the one. Yep, there we go. Alright, so now we'll just move back up. So, looking a bit better. At the very least, it's not like there's some complete weird thing there. It just looks like a single hair strand. So, yeah. Little. So, looks like that now. Not too bad. There's still some parts that are over. Just a few little bits that are overlapping. But okay. play around a little in. I think that if we just move some of these verts around, it's okay. We can just tweak that a little bit and then go over again once we get in Substance Painter. Now that kind of change, which just involves moving some vertices around, that's kind of okay when you're like rigging something. It's when you're messing with the vertex order that it becomes a real problem and you have to do loads of work again. That's what I think. So let's finally just sort of put Marmoset to bed a little for now. That's saved. Alright, so now what we want to do the eye shield first. There we go. What I want to do now is I want to make a start on this whole bone construction thing, and then we'll decide how we're gonna move from there. And what I want to do first is I want to just increase the subdivisions on this grid. So we had about 5, and this is 10 meters for grid lines every 5 units. So that would be like each one of these was 5 units, but obviously that's not particularly useful here. So I believe that's meters. Yeah, this is on meter mode, so one of these is a meter, which could make things a little bit awkward to calculate. So, not to do like the same thing, but maybe grid length and width 10 units, grid lines every, I don't know, 10. Seems a bit low, right? It is a bit low, but we do need it to be quite thorough. We do need more sections. So this is 10, grid lines every 5, subdivisions 5. So each one of these should be 1 centimeter if I'm out correctly. Probably not. Length and width. No, it is definitely not 1 centimeter, is it? This is a 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter grid with grid lines every 5 units. Most definitely is not the way that works. Yeah, exactly. I think I meant 100 there. And probably not even 100, I probably meant something more like 20. Oh, where's it gone? Anyways, let's try that again. So I want length and width every 20 units, grid lines every 5. That'd be a grid line every 4 units. And then you could do 4 subdivisions, and that should get you 1 centimeter gaps, I would like to think. The other issue as well is that it's not quite it's not quite fully on the ground, and we want to position that so that it is. You know, close enough. Okay. Now, one of the most infuriating and frustrating things about rigging is the whole freeze transformations and origin relationships that every object has. And you don't want to mess this up, especially on something that you've made which needs to have a specific origin. So eyes, right? So your eyes need to be of a specific origin in order to rotate properly. And the bigger the eyes are, the worse this gets, right? I've got an example of a character that has absolutely huge eyes and a particular shape. And in order to be able to achieve the rotation on that, the eyes have to be an extremely weird origin in order to be able to render correctly, like to be able to rotate correctly. Otherwise, then you have to resort to things like, you know, like texture eyes or something like that, which I didn't want to do for the time. So, yeah, this kind of relationship involves that every origin point is centered on its 0, right? Your bones should then have the actual real coordinates, right? So if this is like yay high and yay forward, right? This object should be 0'd and your bone should have yay high, yay forward, etc, etc, right? There are obviously like real rigging programs that you can use, like actual third-party stuff. But I don't think that we're going to be doing enough rigging to warrant that kind of thing. All we really want to be able to do is pose and maybe animate the character. So, take everything we got, and I think freeze transformations. Right, so everything here should have the correct origin if it requires to be rotated. Most of this won't need it though. And while I am here, I'm going to turn symmetry on as well, because I remember that there is a clipping issue for the eyelid. And I'm just going to take some of these hair pieces and hide them for a bit, just so that I can do this. Probably like move this a little bit smoother as well while I'm doing that. Alright, so over here, soft select a little bit, not a lot. Just checking that that's definitely selected on the other side via the symmetry, and we're just going to move it forwards. Move it forwards until it connects with, well, you know, is overlapped by the eye lashes there. Now what you do here, right, do you want to move the skin part down so that it does this and becomes an actual eyelid, or do you want to move it up and let the eyelid take over? It's up to you. I think that it's better for the eyelid, sorry, the eyelash, to have its, you know, priority there. But at the same time, you know, it's not, you're not going to look at it that hard, right? So just focus on making sure that there isn't a gap. Look at it like this, right, which is a little bit more realistic. Right? You don't get the white area there anymore, which is much better. And yeah, we're able to see that there's no gap either when we look at it from any other direction. In other words, we're either seeing skin or we're seeing the eyelash. We're not seeing like a bright white eye, which is what we want. Alright, so back on with that, save. And this is the educational version of Maya, before you ask, so it has that pop-up. It is it is licensed, but it is an educational license. So, alright. Now that all of that's fine. Yeah, the rest of this doesn't really need any kind of origin to speak of. The only things that maybe need an origin are the teeth, the tongue, possibly. It doesn't have to, but it would be good if the origin was centered there. Oops. Yep. So all I'm doing is just pressing this button and it just centers the origin. There's nothing complicated about that. Okay. So that Now in fairness, this one would probably be merged to the jaw, but if you then wanted to manipulate the teeth in other ways, so for instance you wanted to, I don't know, like do something like this to change the shape, so maybe something like that, like if you really wanted to, then you might need to think about like either blend shapes or more likely than not bones, because blend shapes I think in Unreal you can only do one of. If you're doing it in Marmoset you can do whatever you want. I think there's no real limit there, but in Unreal you, I think, can only have one blend shape per mesh. Like, as in, if you have a blend shape, it has to be on one complete object. That was the case in UDK anyway, but it might be changed. And then the other object here that needs that is this. And I want to move the origin so that it's about there, because you can use the origin to help position bones. Obviously you can use the vertex, you know, the vertices to do that as well. Pair up, and yeah, so that just makes that a little easier. Then you'll obviously segment the tongue and add bones in along it. Okay. And again, right, like everything, the ore history, like the history is so important. You want that history clean before you do any kind of rigging, or rather, more accurately, binding. Same as that one. Right, this button as well, when you delete all by history, or even delete type by history, for whatever you've got selected, it will delete any deformers, that is to say bones and blend shapes and everything. So when you do that without realizing, you could lose a load of work in one click. So be very careful with that. And obviously freeze transformations. And just going to take a quick look. 0, 0, 0. Right. The other thing I want to make sure that I've done, most of this will be okay, but I want to make sure that all of these names are something that is sensible, or at the very least I can relate to. Okay? And you notice that like we haven't even started the skeleton. It's all trying to fix up the rest of the model before we even begin, because there's so much that can go wrong when the actual mesh isn't prepared properly, at least in my experience. It's one of the reasons I think why rigging is just seen as like this super hard thing, because there's just so much preparation, and yeah, there's a lot of calculation and other stuff like that. And I don't pretend to be like a rigging expert or anything. We're not talking like actual like muscle systems and stuff. We're just talking for, you know, games, and or rather more accurately presenting art in games. And there are just so many aspects that can go wrong, even when you're just trying to make a forward kinematic pose, right? So many things can go wrong when it's not set up properly, and that floor for setting something up properly in here is actually quite high. So let's just real quickly go through and just make sure that everything's got a sensible name. So no names like redo or anything like that. It needs to be very obvious from the get-go what this object is. There are also other things here as well. So like these buttons could probably just be combined now. There's no point keeping them as separate objects because they're not going to be bound specifically to a bone. So we can just combine those. And whenever we do that, by history, raise the object. You can also see that it's come out of the little group. It needs to go back in. And just check. See how that translation is -7? Freeze transformations. Yep, there we go. Because it's moved into the group, it then inherits the group's position, but then it needs to move back into its original position, which is why it has that negative there. And if you were to go ahead and like bind stuff or mess around with it, it might result in some problems. But probably not like that badly, but you know, it's not something you really want to be risking. Why am I not just combining it with the dress here? The reason for that is because just weight painting, and weight painting becomes really difficult when there are like loads of objects that are combined together but are floating. And as much like I named this stream called Floating Poly as a kind of a little bit of a joke, because you are allowed to have objects float. Exactly why it's called that. But the part where floating objects becomes a real problem is when they're floating, but then they're combined with other objects, like if it was this, and there's still separate elements that are floating on top. So when you're going to paint the weight for that object, it becomes so much harder, right? Whereas in this case, when they're separated, you can actually copy the weights of, say, this object, the shirt and everything, and paste it onto the buttons, and that will get you a pretty much perfect weight paint for that. At least in my experience, anyway. I'm sure there are definitely better ways, though. But yeah. Now, over here, I'm not sure if this is a floating object or not. Can't remember. I think it is. Yes, it is. And we need to fix that. So these objects here, right? This whole braid is okay. The bow and the braid like end here, because they're floating, it'd probably be better to detach them and then just keep them detached. I don't think that there is a particular benefit to keeping them like this, right? Sorry, I'm rambling. Let me go ahead and just start that. So extract. It'll probably separate them. It did. Okay, just combine them again. Right, so it's fine if they're on opposite sides like this, because you've got tools like symmetry and things like that to work with. You know, that's fine. But with this, you can see that quite clearly, you know, it ends at a certain point, and we didn't really need to like combine them again. But what needs to happen is that the parts, if I just quickly detach this slot as well. Find those two as well. Right, so if I go here, so this bit that intersects with the bow here absolutely must be the same weight. So if, say for instance, you had a bone and it travels here, and then you've got a bit here, 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 right? So it comes along in order to manipulate this bit of this like tail. You don't want a situation where these bones move and then the end points of this mesh start separating from the rest, and that can be really, really problematic. Extremely problematic, actually. And you can resolve this with some level of weight paint copying, so that you get, but you know, if you treat this as a single hard surface object, right, or at the very least this central, like the tie, just here rather than these bits that, you know, come out, and then this lot has like 100% weight, or well, the bottom half rather has 100% weighting maybe, and then these like top parts here have 100% weighting, then what, you know, that'll be fine so long as it all, you know, remains attached, or at least looks like it's attached. Then that's okay. But if they, you know, start rotating around and then this bit falls off and, you know, becomes detached like that, that would be extremely bad. I suppose truthfully the best way of going about it is that all of the objects are just combined anyway when you go to do the low poly, but sometimes that's problematic to model. You know? And you know, maybe you might not even want that to happen anyway. So, alright. Now. Delete by type, history. Right? You'll see that they're also part of this like little group here. Increase transformations, and there we are, this one as well. I'll just make absolutely sure that it's been, that the history's been nuked, and we don't want any kind of like grouping like this. It's just messy, so we take it out, delete that. We've deleted the group there, and we want to make sure this is, you know, absolutely named according to the exact same naming conventions that we've been following. Okay. I'm wondering if you can actually hear that. Nope, not at all. So you're hearing the benefits of my dead K70 looks already. Right, so the braid there, the braid tail, we'll call it the like tail, or the end, or maybe, yeah, it's the end would be a good one to call out. And then of course over here, and you could also like detach these so that they're completely separate. I don't think that's necessary, because you could just mirror the weights and that will intelligently map the other set of bones to the other side. So no need to do that. Again, delete all history, freeze the transformations. Because these two are combined and these two are combined, there's no point setting an origin point for them. The only problem with this is that then this means that you have to form this origin point yourself, which can be tricky. But I suppose you could use like a locator or something first. So like if you made a locator and made it the exact correct position, and then you could just make your bone on top of that, but what's the point? You might as well have just made the bone correctly in the first place. So, in they go. Okay. And just check one more time. Yep, these three need their transformations frozen again because they've just been added to the group. Yep. By history. There we go. A little bit easier to talk about something new, even though, well, all I'm really doing right now is just going through, you know, file naming protocol, which I'm pretty sure most of you have drilled in by now, probably. Still. The naming convention on this aspect of the hair is really, really strange right now, and it may be something that I think is worth changing. And if it is something that you think might be worth changing, I suppose, like you've got that gut feeling that you should, then it probably would be worth it. So right now it's got like LP hair 1 BL 1, which of course means absolutely nothing to you right now, right? Presumably you may have worked out that it means back left, or 1 and then back left, but it's just too much of a mouthful, or rather more accurately, sorry, it's just too difficult to decipher this. Not only that, but there's no underscore to indicate that, you know, it's another sort of type within hair, right? So we'll try and make it have a little bit more sense. So what I'm getting at is that this is the outer set of hair, right? that also has, you know, a front, or rather more like it is the back section, and this is number 1, number 2, number 3, right? So something like hair, then maybe back, right? And I'm using the whole word just because that's easier to understand when trying to decipher this. Or maybe even like underscore B might make more, you know, some sense as well. But just using the whole word here makes it a little easier. Hair, back, and this is the like absolutely stupid decision I made here, right? So you see how it goes right 1 or R1, right? We can take R for meaning right, that's fine, but then following it up with the number just makes no sense. Your left right suffix should pretty much always just be on the end, so that when you go to do intelligent flipping and like mirroring and stuff like that, you just use the suffix underscore R and underscore L. So when you're using underscore R1, right, because you've messed up and not thought ahead, you know, things are just going to become harder. So we want to go ahead and say that this is obviously low poly hair, it's the back hair, and this is the first section of that. But the other thing to bear in mind is that there is a second section that's underneath this. So we either go, say, outer or inner, right? So back, outer, 1, and then R, right? So that seems like a longer name. It is, but it also makes more immediate sense. And when we're talking about, like, you know, riggers and animators, you know, they're not the people who modeled the character. So any kind of like issue where they're then having to decipher your work is just going to irritate them. And it's also going to irritate you when you come back to see this work, you know, which gets boomeranged back to you about, say, a week or 2 later, and you don't know what anything means because it's been that much time and you've worked on some of the project or whichever. So we're just going to use that naming convention and copy it. We go to the next one. Right, so back, outer, 2, right, makes sense. And then this bit, which is a shared sort of part, so it goes between the 2 mirrors. So back, outer, and instead of going 1 or 2 or anything like that, you go just mid. Mid can caps it if you really want to, but I think just reads easier if it's like this. And then take away the mirroring suffix. So there we go. Actually, since that is the suffix, I don't mind having that be capitalized. It doesn't really matter. You can do whichever one you want. Just stick to it. Okay, and then the same over here. Back, outer, 1, L. I apologize, this isn't like the most exciting thing in the world, but it's also waking me up, so there is that. Okay. Hiding that now. And there's a bit here where the sort of like, I guess you could call them front bangs are sort of clipping. I don't mind them clipping on the outer and the inner, that's fine. That's okay. But I may make some adjustments over here so that they don't clip as much. But the only issue with this is, do you manipulate it before or after, or do you, rig this whole lot with bones? And I guess this, like, obviously it depends on the context, but if it only needs to move from here, then I guess you can manipulate these parts so that, it doesn't clip as much. But it also said the same of the back lot here, where this could be manipulated and moved around by bones. So, like, the real question rather is, what shall I do about it? And I think the answer is, I look back at if I had just removed. Okay. And I see that most of these issues go away when this lot of hair is back. Okay. It seems to fit okay. So this seems okay to me. I might even squeeze these parts in a little bit, but it may be better to do that in post rather than here. The hairband, like, it also works with the hairband as well, because if I move this inwards, then it might help with the hairband. Or maybe if I move it outwards, it doesn't really matter, I guess. I think moving it inwards might be a little easier. Or just to move the hairbands in. Not 100% sure. Need to be certain though. So let me take this bit and that in a little bit. Okay. I don't need to do any reprojection anymore, so the model is essentially, you know, manipulatable. It's already got the normal detail I want, it's already got all of that stuff. So the only issue is just making sure that it's all symmetrical. I'll go back here. And you'll see that this part, I can't really symmetry unless I manipulate this area. But the good thing is that it's the inner part, right? So it doesn't really get seen because this part protects it. So what I can do, I don't need these parts to connect up. Something like that. And then do the same on the other side. And I'm going to unhide just to check. And of course, there's no issue with that. So I've got those two, and now they can be combined. Right? And that, of course, makes things a whole lot easier. I don't have to join these up, though. I can keep them separated like that. And now I can manipulate. Move, oops. X, yep, we'll move that in a little bit, there we go. I suppose the only issue with this is that the headband might be a little bit strangely shaped for that. So again, I've already got the normals that I want, so I can just move that in. Move that up as well. Backwards a bit. Something like that. So that it intersects with this outer part, but then pins this inner part. And go back over here. That in. A little bit. You can see that it's beginning to clip through the inner piece as well. That's okay. Push that in. Seems okay. That's that. Now the braids are beginning to show up, and don't really want it to behave like that. If I just hide this and see. So you see that they do come in through that way, but it was useful that they were being clipped through this thing. It kind of prevented like a weird render issue like that. So we'll do that. Again, I'm not like super fussy about like the massive amount of like clipping you're gonna get, because there's, you know, you're always gonna get objects like this, like behaving like that, right? That's okay. That seems quite neat. Yeah, I think that's okay. Okay. So with that, go ahead, select, get everything's history deleted. There's also the issue where this has now, you know, run off. And of course, like, it's fine that they're connected up like that. We could unconnect them if we really wanted to. Do the same for this as well, because we don't need these parts to be connected. So where would we cut from, and what would we cut? Probably cut all the way like here. Maybe not like that. So cut there. Gotta remember these steps well, because I've got to replicate them. Because they're technically not, you know, mirrors proper yet. Even though they are mirrored, right? But so about like that. Something like that, rather. And obviously the straggler here. Alright, and then I'm going to do the same for the other side. I could just do it to one and then mirror it as well. That would also be valid. In fact, might very well do that. Just need to be aware, obviously, this piece will no longer be, like, you won't ever be able to like use it for any other purpose because it's been you know, messed with like that. I just want to make sure that this scene is definitely saved as something else. So yep. So I've just made a new file basically. Lost my thing. If I was feeling real brave, I could remove like whole chunk, but I'm super conscious of, you know, like if it's, you know, become a problem, like if it flies out particularly, like, and then it exposes some parts. Also reminds me I should probably have painted this area as well, like a grey or something, but there's so much of it that it's probably not that much of a problem provided that, you know, the rest, like the hair here doesn't move too much with the back, you'll probably be all right. Right, so just need to check where the origin is. So you see how the origin is over here? Well, that's obviously not going to do, and obviously you can't really have an origin of like this centered when you're trying to mirror something over. So go over here, pick a line as the center one, and the easiest way, straight up DX, hold that, there you go. And I don't want this bit here either because it's just a bit too close to that center, because it might accidentally merge them. I don't want that. Let me just check as well, actually. So if I go back here and I'm looking at it from this angle and partially that angle, and I can see that I can't see it, the part that I selected, I mean. And I'll go back in, I'm gonna go, let's see where that is. That's like start that much, right, okay. That's a few polys saved, right? Not many, but, you know, whatever you can get. So, with that, and at the origin in the center, and mirror that over. Mirror is normally like figured already, so that's okay. There we go. Then we have that section. Because I want to do it with that, but I don't necessarily want to do it with these parts because these are definitely separate and they're overlapping and they're mirrored, so they need to have their you know, their space, right? So the only issue is where things like that happen, where they're kind of overlapping across each other. It's not that much of an issue, but because of this center part that's covering over them, so I'm not too fussed. But you know, it can be a little bit awkward and distracting, like when you're making it, but after that point it's probably okay. Might just move. I felt a sneeze coming on or something. Anyway, we've only got 15 minutes left and we haven't even started the actual rig. It's just there's so many checks. I'm super paranoid. Alright. Okay, so that bit that we now completed. Alright, center the pivot. Make sure it's definitely center. If transformations are frozen, every object delete its history, put it back inside, and freeze again. This bit, yep, that's all fine. And this bit also has a centerpiece here, which is, of course, is the exact same as the others. I just want to like hide these two. I can judge this piece and where, for instance, I can like have it stop. So probably about here, and you see how that just sort of like goes over the top, like completely unnecessarily, right? Even because it was just copy pasted from the other version. So we're just going to go ahead and delete that. Probably just flatten that out. Maybe not. But otherwise that's fine. And we don't like. It initially had this ref suffix because it was originally used as like a instance when texturing it. Obviously, since it doesn't need that anymore and now it's an actual the geometry's finished, we can actually give it its proper naming convention. So here, air back outer will now become inner. This bit as well. Because there's no longer a left or right designation between these, you can now just actually just call it 1, 2 or 3. However, the consistency of it can be pretty problematic. But in this case, as long as it's just understood that these inner parts are definitely like combined, hopefully it'll be alright. Air back inner, and then one called 1 already, I'm not sure. 1 as well? No, it was called 2. Good. 1, 2. I guess we can call this one 3. But it's a different group, and that probably makes that okay. See that? I can see as well that this bit and this bit, could probably afford more, to lose more doing that. This inner bit also has a lot going for it there. Say for instance that I were to go and animate like this bit, right? And just start like moving it, I don't know. Not quite like this, but trying to get like a feel for there. Oh. Less. Like, so obviously that's not how it would go, right? But this bit should probably afford more. And what about this bit? Well, while I'm there, change the soft selection from surface to volume, just to make this easier. Move that up. Right, so then this bit, not like that specifically, right? But you've got quite a bit of, leeway for that. And when it's going to be animated with bones, it's obviously going to be very different than that, but it just means that it has more space to be able to, play with. So, okay, I think that's fine. Right, just make sure everything's all... Okay. 1, 2, 3, outer L and L1. Want to be very sure about that, because obviously that's not kosher here. Right, there we go. Yep. Okay. And then this bit, that bit is okay. Air bangs, probably make sure that 1 and 2 are there, but it's understood that it's a different section, and that's okay. We'd probably call this 1, like 2 to replace the name Bose, and then 3 here, right? So then that is understood as an actual chain. That might help. And there's all the fringe pieces here. They're all going from 1 through till 6. That's fine. Headband there. Okay, that's fine. Headband 1, no. Legs are over here, and of course, as you can probably imagine, the legs are detached from the rest, right? Because like trying to combine this skirt with this set of legs is just not going to work. But provided that this area does not move, or rather is rigged 100% to whatever bone is over here, and like is rigged to whatever the top here is, then you won't have any clipping and it should be fine. The only worry I've got is the whole double-sided skirt thing, and since of course it's rendering in Marmoset, you don't need physics, so it's skirts are hard. Right, this will be, I think, the second time proper where I'll be actually like rigging a skirt. Yeah, it's as far as I understand, like, assuming you're not using physics, right, it's a lot of bones and a lot of manipulation and a lot of work. Right. Okay, next. There's the lower eyelashes here. Yep, that's fine. Whoops. Lower teeth. Yep, they've been manipulated already. That's fine. This bit here. That's fine. Just need to make sure that the bit at the top is definitely like copied over, and then this bit can be, boned. Okay. Okay, so the shoulder frills are not attached to this, right? So you remember what I said about the whole like floating objects, right? So as long as this is a separate object, and can you imagine trying to weight paint this thing and then having this in the way? You probably can't. It would be really annoying. You're right. So yeah, that's why it's a separate object, because it's just so inconvenient to attempt to weight paint with that. That's because the thing, it was just so big. Not too fussed for it to be like perfectly underneath this, especially when it's not even underneath an actually different object. All that needs to happen is that it's visibly underneath, right? So, or at the very least, like, next to it. All right. Yeah, so this is what I want to try and avoid. So this, where it's like floating off like this, I want to fix that. Make sure that it's, inside at the very least. It doesn't need to be, fully perfect, just as long as it doesn't create a gap. I see that I have messed up and I've not put symmetry on. That's okay. This is a mirrored object. We'll just mirror it over after. That's another reason as to why you would want this to be separate from, objects, because it just becomes so much easier to manage like symmetry and stuff like that. If it was not, and it was combined with this, there would be much more, there would be many more problems with that. The kind of thing that really, really you do not want to be dealing with. Now, I don't mind a small little like hole like that, because it's just, how would you even look at it? You would never get that close. Like, to the point where, like, you know, Boundary Break won't even find it. So don't worry too much about something like that. Just make sure that it is actually sensible. So long as there's no gap, and hopefully when the weights are copied over, you won't get it floating off, or at the very least it won't be floating off too far that it becomes a problem, right? But at the very least it should be digging into the model. If it's not digging in, then there is a chance, right? I mean, it's cool. However, you know, things like ambient occlusion do help with that. So like games today, they tend to have things like ambient occlusion and screen space ambient occlusion. So, you know, when you've got objects that are kinda next to each other, but they're not, you know, close enough, they're not digging enough, right? The ambient occlusion might save you from, you know, seeing such a thing, but it's so small that it's probably not that much of an issue. Alright, and we're very near the end for today. That's in terms of time, because I've got a deadline. But we'll try and like fix this up, and then we'll do the actual like beginning for rigging. Not tomorrow, because we've got, as I mentioned, you know, deadline, but Thursday. But I'm hoping that tomorrow I'll be able to release some breakdowns. So I should hope, like, it won't be on here, it will be on Twitter, and it'll be a link to like an ArtStation post. Hopefully it will be something that you know, will be interesting to at least one person, who knows. All right, dig this, because it's the inner part. Again, I'm not super fussed, just so long as it's actually inside. Even this like minor piece of clipping where it's, you know, blue is probably not even that much of a real issue, so long as it's actually, you know, inside. Oh, there's a lot more here as well. Now this is the point where you do want to take the soft selection back to surface, because now we're dealing with only the inner. It's only the inner side that's having problems, and also the faces are sort of going through each other. I mean, backface culling takes care of that, but it's probably best that they don't do that anyway. But again, like, you don't need to be too careful, just make sure it's dug straight into the mesh below it. You know, the shirt here. That's all in. All right. Now I'm going to delete the other side. Here. I'll go to the top. Control F1 to isolate, by the way. And just check the fit. Yep, it's definitely in the right place. And mirror that across. Pretty sure it's in the right place. Yeah. There you go. Okay. Delete all by type history. Okay. Just check one more time. Yeah, that's okay. If neck ribbon, shirt frills here. Now, this isn't a double-sided object, so it's entirely possible that we could want to go right ahead and make it double-sided, either by duplicating the faces right here or doing stuff. But I think that's just a bit much, you know. Like, I don't know. I think it's fine. Like from when we're looking from outside, it's just if we like start going too far and looking like this that it becomes problematic. But I don't think I'm gonna have that type of shot anyway. You know. So, but it just means that it's a floating object like this. I think we'll leave it as this. Right. Anyway. It doesn't need to dig in though, I think. Okay, because the skirt above it is just so thin that attempting to mess with that is just playing with fire. So there should be enough clearance for when this moves, the rest of it moves with it, and because it will be stealing basically the weights that this has, it shouldn't result in a problem. Hopefully. We'll just have to see about that one. At least that's what I theorize. Alright, now we're on to the bottom, which is the tongue we've done, upper eyelashes, right, which are all one object, because they're all going to move at the same, like, they're going to move in the same way, and yeah, there's no need to worry too hard about them, so that's fine. And then upper teeth is a hard surface object. We'll probably be, using one bone for that, I think. Alright then. So, lastly, I'm pretty sure it should all be fine, but we're going to do it anyway. Delete all the history. Modify. Freeze transformations. Oops, whoops, I didn't have anything selected. Derp. Freeze that. There we go. There we go. And we're ready to begin. And take the textures off now. And we have a try count of 106,000, so 106,148, right? Which is a lot, definitely. Depends on the game. I don't think you'd see the skirts with like this much fidelity though. In particular with like this. It's entirely possible that this might be a opacity map, but I really don't want to use an opacity map unless I have to. Mostly because, it changes the shader type from opaque to masked and stuff like that. I mean, maybe, but then at that point, what's the difference, right? Like, what's the difference between this, which is doing that, and then if they were flattened? Because you still have to have the outgoing anyway, which you could paint. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe. Alright then. Lastly, some objects we didn't check yet. But I'm pretty sure this is fine. Yep. The most that I need to happen with this is that the origin is moved to a slightly more sensible location. So, easiest way, DV, straight in there, and then hold D, about there. It's not like it needs to be super precise, it just needs to be centered. Right, there we are. And then finally this, right? Now, this is interesting because you may very well want to keep these as separate, like left and right, so that it makes the bone location a little easier, particularly with where you want to start the pivoting and whatnot. So let's demonstrate that. So I'm going to take the right side and just take that out. Right. Now the pivot for this object I'm going to put it roughly. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. Right? So I know that the pivot of this object is this vertex. So I want to do the exact same for the other side. Because there's only so many vertices there, I can, you know, quite precisely locate where that is. Yep. Center there. On this one, center there. Alright. Now when I go ahead and like play around with them and rotate them, they rotate on this axis like that. Like that. And then it's just a case of when I go to put the bone there, I'll put it in that pivot and then move down along, attaching to the various pivots. However, one thing that does make this harder is this angle, right? So this angle makes things a lot more difficult because you're trying to like move it on a diagonal. That's hard. So rather than dealing with diagonals, it'd help if I, you know, targeted the correct place before. Okay, it doesn't need to be like super flat, but it does need to be as flat as possible. And then like you'll move the bones to compensate that. The reason why we sculpted it in that position though, I think is, you know, to get the sort of fluidness of it. So there's that little bit of a curve there. But in terms of the actual bones shape, the bones shape is going to be completely straight because you want that to be free from any kind of weird manipulation and such. Right? It's okay that the mesh has that little bit of curve in there. That's okay. It's just that the bone itself that does all of the movement should not have any kind of influence like that. At least that's what I think. So the way of going about that, so the step snap, I'm just going to turn that off. Now I want to try and line every vertex up. Every vertex, all of the vertices rather, lined up like this, right? Again, it's not that much of a problem if they're not completely 100% aligned. Maybe. But it might be some good actually if they were. Probably be a good thing just to if we were to take this line perhaps as a reference, like this, and we're trying to aim for this line, but obviously this area is totally, you know, not following that. If I've got that, and if I just move this origin over here, roughly, okay, this line. Now obviously it's only moving one, you know. but we can always mirror from whichever side. There we are. Now this edited pivot, we should reset and back like that. Like I say, it's not like it needs to be super precise, just enough so that we know that we're going along this line here, and this endpoint should definitely be we still sculpted it in that sort of diagonal because, well, not really because, more like it was just something that we were doing at the time. This is more just sort of fixing it, so to speak, so that when we rig it, it's not going to be a problem. Does that make sense? I hope so. Well, what I'm getting at here is that it's not, like, you know, it's entirely possible for us to make mistakes during the sculpting and modeling process and forget steps ahead. That's okay. Just remember that there's other steps too. Hopefully this will mirror. It did not. Can we change it so that it goes along? Ah, yeah, there we go. Direction minus. There we go. Oops. Yeah. Alright, we see that that's over like that. The pivot is still the same. And just extract that out. Check where the pivot is. It's right down there. At the moment it's on custom though. We want it definitely not on that. Object, I would hope. It may also be that it needs to be reset. There we go. Okay, back to object. Ah, yes. Reset. Okay, it's back onto that, and of course it has like strange rotations. That's fine. Just go ahead and freeze the transformations there first. Not quite like that. Center. Yeah, center them. Want to like reset them as well. So bake pivot perhaps. Yeah. So bake pivot, freeze. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Use that. Alright, check. Checking that it's not messed it up too much. Oof. Just checking that it didn't like move them out like weirdly or anything. Check that that's all okay as well. So the object's rotation is a little out of whack. Just trying to find a way to like fix the rotation of it, so to speak. When I zero that out and then hit freeze, does that work? Oh no, it's on. Okay, we'll fix that later. For now though, I just want to make sure that the pivot is definitely going to be on the same place. So again V, back onto that vertex that we used before. And if I hit insert, I can't see a rotator for it. Absolute 0. Oh, that's position, isn't it? Yes, it was. I want the rotation, if possible. I can't see it. Rip. Oh, we'll come to fix that in a while. I'm presuming it might be like a something where we just need to restart it as well. That might be why. We'll look at that later, but for now, understand basically that when it's straight, it's a lot easier. You can manipulate it anyway. So if, for instance, you know how long the actual mesh is, you could just make the rig, except make it straight, and so long as it's long enough, you could then just position it back down into where the trail, like the ribbon trail is, and then rig it that way. Like, sorry, bind it after you've manipulated the bones, and then paint it, and then if you were to reset the pose, they would then follow it. There's two ways of going about that, but we're going with this way because it's just simpler and easier, and it just means that the mesh is just fixed from the get-go. Alright, so the hilarious thing about this is that we've gone over, but we still haven't actually put down a single bone. But this is all about rig preparation. So, you know, last thing to do, finally. That's probably why they weren't playing so nicely. Yeah, that's why. Alright, freeze transformations. There we are. See, that's why. Alright, and then we're just gonna go ribbon, or it probably might be back ribbon or something. LP, ribbon, trail, or L. Like trying to determine your left and right. I know, right? Are there? Okay, make sure before deleting it, delete all the history. Okay. You see how they go away? Gonna be really careful about that. In it goes. Okay, and that's that. So check the name of this as well. I want it to share. Bow ribbon. Yep, not having that. I'm not even gonna bother with that. LP ribbon and then ribbon trail. So the only thing, I'm just gonna call it big ribbon actually, because it's the biggest ribbon and it's on the back as well. So big ribbon. Big ribbon. There we go. Alright, so that concludes today. Like I say, we didn't put down a single bone, but all of the mesh is correctly named. It's all gonna have its history deleted, and it should all have the transformations frozen. So with that, we're ready to actually start putting some bones down. So sorry about that. I thought like maybe we'd be able to get some bones down, but not quite enough. I've spent too long just fixing it, but at least that's, you know, all of this down fixed enough to actually think about, you know, rigging and starting it. So thank you so much for coming today, whether you were live or whether or not you were in post. If the music choices, you know, maybe the music choices helped, or maybe they should be slightly more upbeat. I'm not sure just yet. So I went with something a little bit more somber and calming. If you've got some feedback for that, I'd be greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much, and for next time, which is Thursday, I hope to see you there. Alright, thank you so much.